we can probably call the meeting to order. I think it's just about the right time. It's 1:05. We'll call it 1 o'clock. Excuse me. I'll get this thing open. There is one item. Mary, I think you had the verbiage that we use, the opening statement concerning Indigenous lands, et cetera, that we normally, or has started to become accustomed to be read with the opening of these meetings. I'm sorry I don't have a copy of that. If you have a copy, if you could read it, or alternatively, we'll acknowledge that we are on traditional lands and introduce that into the next meeting, because I don't want to hackney it up too badly. I think you had a copy that was quite good, or had a statement was quite good.
Yeah, John, I'll reply to that. I think the first thing we need to do is the roll call.
Yeah, no, that was just an issue. I'm just waiting for the agenda to come through. Yeah, no, I'm going to do that.
That statement now is being considered by council, and so yes, until that time, we won't.
Okay, fair enough.
Give one. And
yeah,
I'm not sure what the timeline is for that, although I have sent them an example.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. But Hillary, and all due respect, Hillary and Courtney had already told me that this was under consideration, and I just wondered if we had a copy of it. So, yeah. Anyways, whatever this. Oh gosh, now my email's slowed down. I haven't got that. Hillary, have you sent that through?
It's still sending, John. Courtney, I think your internet might be a little faster than mine. Any chance you could send them the agenda?
Okay. Do you want to, while we're waiting for that to come through, could I ask you to start the agenda? We'll call the meeting to order. The next item is roll call, as Mary so rightly pointed out. I think all members are present, as well as Courtney and Hillary. What's the next item, Hillary?
So we'll be doing opening remarks. Yep.
Okay, and the opening remarks would be what we have just gone through. I think consideration of that, which will be coming in the near future. Next item is a declaration of, I can't remember.
Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof.
Are there any pecuniary interests of any of the members that need to be disclosed?
Nope.
Okay. Next item.
So we have the approval of the July 6, 2020 Heritage Committee minutes.
Okay, has everyone had a chance to go over those minutes? Mm-hmm. Are there any comments, errors, omissions?
I have a comment, John.
Yes, Barb.
As somebody who wasn't present at that meeting, item 7.3, update on budget item for 2019 regarding preparation of more plaques.
Mm-hmm.
Could I have an expansion on the discussion of that statement?
Correct me if I'm wrong, other members of the committee, but I believe we talked about the actual cost of manufacturing the plaques and whether we could afford to have some made and put into inventory rather than having them made as one-offs. Is that correct?
I think we actually discussed that last time we were in a live meeting quite a while ago, and
yeah,
I'm remembering it that way, that we were gonna.
We've talked about it almost every meeting.
Yeah, it seems that way.
I don't know. Are there any comments that anyone would like to make about that? Do we want to expand on that bit of the minutes? I don't. It didn't take up a great deal of time. I think I do recall that we mentioned it again and the cost of it and whether they were.
If I could just interject, John, I only that kind of jumped out at me because, in fact, I have asked this to be an agenda item on today's with today's meeting. So if you don't mind, then I'm happy to leave that comment the way it is, and then we'll discuss it when we get to that agenda item further on.
Perfect. Okay, I'm good with that.
Thank you.
Any other comments? No further comments. If I could call for a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll move.
Seconded.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Any dissension?
Okay.
No, carried unanimously. Okay, the next item, Hillary, please, would be,
So the business, oh, actually, sorry, John, we're just going to read the resolution now. So the resolution,
thank you.
yep, 2020-001, that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as written and distributed. So our next item is business arising from minutes, moving forward during COVID-19. And John Arnold, I'll send that back to you.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Hillary. Oh, and if I could just make a quick comment, a slight side issue. Hillary and Courtney ran over the standardization of the recording of minutes that is being adopted and adapted for all the committees, which I went over. So there will be a very standardized recording of resolutions, comments, etc., which I think is really quite good. I think they've done a great job on it, but I'm not sure that hasn't been distributed to everyone, has it, Hillary?
No, not yet, but it will be distributed with the next agenda that comes out in January.
Right. It really does look pretty good. So everything will be. Well, thanks, Hillary. It's finally come through here. It will make things a little easier. Everything will be up sort of a very standard format. Okay. I guess one of the things that I would like to have the committee talk about, and we did talk about it a little bit, I think, the last meeting, although it was sort of early days, or I guess mid days, is moving forward during this COVID-19 problem. And it's I think John Levac brought up some really, really good points, and I have been thinking about them a great deal. You know, what is our role going to be? How are we going to provide a meaningful contribution to the township and to council? I think, John, you made the point that we may have an issue, or people may have an issue with letting strangers into their houses or onto their properties for quite a while going forward. But I've noticed, Mary, you are so darn good at all this stuff. And you've been, you know, contributing to the President's Pioneer, et cetera, et cetera. I'd just like to get input from anyone that would like to make a comment of where do you think we're going to go in the future, in the relatively near future? Let's not go too far, but in the relatively near future. Anyone like to make a comment about that?
Well, I'll start on that, I suppose. I don't think anything's really changed from a COVID standpoint from our last meeting, you know, from the standpoint of actually visiting properties. But I've been thinking about that quite a bit. And I think, you know, how can we maybe convert this into a virtual kind of look at a property? Like, instead of sending the whole committee in to look at a property, send one member in and actually do some video, and then bring that back to a meeting kind of like this. Because I think at the end of the day, some of these rules, regulations, and protocols surrounding COVID-19 and groups of people in general, I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon at all. I'm, you know, looking at what the universities are doing. You know, Barb's aware of, very up on that, I'm sure, as well. I just don't see anything changing for a long time. Like, we're not talking weeks, months. I mean, we're going out, is the way I'm kind of projecting it, but I may be dead wrong. But that would be an idea. Maybe if, you know, we identified a property that we might want to have a look at as being heritage worthy, plaque worthy, whatever, to send one person. And if we could get the permission of the property owner to maybe do a little bit of walking video, or maybe just some pictures, that would probably be enough. I mean, we can identify heritage worthiness, through photographs. So that was an idea I wanted to share with you guys. That's all.
That's a great idea, John.
Mhm.
Anyone else have some comments they'd like to add to John's very good idea?
Simply that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
I'll gladly take a second. Go ahead.
Well, I think that there's, as I said before, there's lots of work this committee can do in addition to site visits. And I think that this may come up later in the agenda, but I have some ideas for projects we can take with the research that's been done and communicate that to our township, either through the Pioneer or through the township website. And I'm thinking in terms of perhaps a heritage map for a driving tour, like outstanding heritage pieces in our township. For instance, I've been doing some Pioneer Cemetery research, and I was at the Ellis Church Cemetery, and I met a man there who said, "Oh, I just saw this sign that said the founding of Puslinch, and I'm interested in local heritage." And so I ended up here, and then he asked me about other places in the township that would be worth seeing, and because he's not from the township. And I thought, that could be an opportunity for us to highlight some of these places, and we can do that through through this COVID timeframe. I have some other ideas, but I think my point is simply, although we can't do site visits, they occupy 1/5 of our meeting time through the year. And I think that there's a lot that we already have that we can build on in order to engage the people who live in the township with the kind of work we're doing, and hopefully sustain ourselves through this period of COVID. Does that make sense to anyone?
Sure does, Mary. I really like your idea. It's almost something, if we do it, that I'll dumb it down, a map of our township with historically and culturally interesting spots noted thereon, posted on the township website. I mean, it becomes a go-to thing. I think you've got some great ideas. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff you've thrown on the table. It's going to take quite a bit of discussion, but I love the idea.
Do you? The other thing is that, I've mentioned this, I think, to council, and I don't know if I mentioned it in a meeting here, but, they have their own agenda, but a cycling tour as well might be useful, whether or not that is an exact replica of a driving tour. But I think that's another thing we could do, and maybe in conjunction with Speed River Bicycle.
Great ideas.
Okay.
Great ideas. A lot to think about. A lot that we should discuss.
Well,
and develop and move forward on.
And these kinds of tours are quite have been quite commonplace in other jurisdictions. I know Waterloo Region, former Waterloo County had them, and I think there's models we can look at, but I'm not sure how much of that we need to rely on. I think we know our context very well. And we could also, once it's produced, we can look at driving times and Oh, I don't know. Maybe we should just geocache at every historic place. But yeah, there's lots of connections we can make if we choose to.
That's a great idea. I used to do geocaching, by the way, so it's great fun. At least I enjoyed it. So,
Mhm.
anyways, Matt, you were going to make a comment.
Thank you, John, and thank you so much, Mary. I agree 100%. We have, I look at where we are now is once we finish, and it's on our agenda later on, once we get the registry up to date, it opens the door to our next chapter of activities. And the built heritage is only one piece of what we can look at. Mary had some excellent comments there, and I would encourage anybody to check out the new township website. You'll see a lot of the heritage information is now on the new website, so you'll see stories of Corwin and different places. A lot of the information that Robert McFarland had gathered as part of his schoolhouse or school section presentations, you'll see some of that on the website too. So staff have already picked up on that and have put it there. So I think it may be a resource that the committee could add to in the future. But the two pieces I'd like to, that have been rambling around in my head lately, one, maybe for the longest time, was we have next, maybe we want to look at natural heritage features, which is something that I think has been the mandate of the committee, and it can all be done outdoors and consistent with, as John said, the COVID-19 protocols. But the other piece that we started the meeting talking about is I want to better understand our role as a heritage committee when it in terms of reconciliation as well. And when all this talk of monuments and things, I want to make sure that our work in acknowledging the monuments, the buildings that are monuments to our civilization, how can that be done in a way that is respectful of the previous civilizations here, the Aboriginals, the First Nations. I think back to the stories that Barb tells of the Aboriginal people helping her relatives get established here. I think that's going to be an important part of our role moving forward, and I hope our committee will be interested in looking deeper into where does heritage start and end. We keep talking about acknowledging heritage that maybe our ancestors built, but what was here before? How can we acknowledge one without disrespecting the other? That sort of stuff. I think that's going to be an important role for our committee, and that can happen regardless of COVID-19.
Thank you, Matt. Very, very well said.
Mhm. Matt, in reference to reconciliation and territorial acknowledgements, I have written a piece for the Pioneer on this subject. I'm not sure that I circulated it to you folks. It ended up with Lynn, and there was some sense that this question of territorial acknowledgement needed to be addressed with participation of appropriate First Nations groups. The county has territorial acknowledgement, I think, in process. So that's very much, Matthew, just to say that's very much my concern as well. And I do think that there may be a way through signage, and again, on the township website, to present a bigger picture of the Indigenous population here in the past and in the present. And I agree, this is something we need to do. It's super appropriate for us to do it within the next planning year, I would think.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, I would concur. It's this is not something we can do alone. This is something to do it properly and respectfully. It needs to include all parties that are affected. And I'm gonna, again, everything we talk about, we have to keep in mind as well that we are a committee of council, and as you pointed out earlier, a lot of the stuff has to go through council, and most appropriately has to go through staff. We have to keep in mind that as much as we can be idea fountains, we have to make sure that our staff are able to keep up with our desires to have things done. There's certain things we can do, but we
Mhm.
have to recognize that, you know, our staff needs to be enabled and up to speed and on board with all this as well, and that we're working within the bounds of what they can achieve. And if we have a target, maybe it's a 4-year timeline, maybe it's a 2-year timeline, but certainly we have to work within those boundaries. But thank
Mhm.
you for letting me know about what's already going on.
Mhm. Certainly within the county, our township is the one that has most evidence of Indigenous occupation. And it's not very well known, but it's impressive. So for instance, Matt, the largest neutral village or town site in Ontario is in Puslinch. It's larger than the capital town of the neutral nation. So it's a significant, really significant site, both locally and provincially. And I think that there's work to be done to figure out how to acknowledge that appropriately without endangering the site, and engage it as part of our understood heritage. That's
Thanks,
all.
Mary. Matt and Mary, between the two of you, and maybe anyone else who's interested, but Matt, would it be appropriate if we as a committee tried to present an outline of where we would kind of like to go with this, so that we don't run off in a direction that maybe the council doesn't want us going in? I think all these ideas, by the way, are absolutely tremendous. I totally agree with you, Mary, that we are sitting in the midst of a very historical area, and acknowledging this is really important, and how we acknowledge it. And I agree, the comment was made, we can't do this on our own. This has to involve the various people that we're trying to respect and record their history of, and who that would be within. I would presume that this would come in under the Six Nations Confederacy. They must have people that are involved in this on staff down there, or people that are doing it. I don't know. We used to have quite a few people from First Nations, from Six Nations actually working for us, but that was a long time ago that I was involved in the company. So I really have lost track of all the people that might be of assistance, but I can certainly find out. I've got some fairly deep contacts within the Indigenous communities in various parts of Canada, and they're pretty well connected. I'm more than happy to make a couple of phone calls and find out if we can get a reference as to who we might be talking to carry this forward. I really like the idea, by the way, guys. I think it's tremendous.
So if I could, John, I think to put some structure to these ideas, just to give another example, what council does at the beginning of each term is they typically have a meeting to discuss goals and objectives for the term. What we're doing now is basically that kind of discussion, without and trying to avoid getting into the nitty-gritty of each piece. I think maybe to give some structure to this would be best to have staff make note of these projects that are being floated, put them back on our agenda in January for us to maybe rank, and in the meantime, that'll give staff a chance to consider them. Because remember, this could create workload for them.
Yes.
And then this way, this committee is expressing the things we'd like to achieve over the remainder of our term, and maybe staff can help us parse that out into the bits that need to be done, so we can achieve them and check them off as being done. Such as later on today, we're going to have a discussion about the plaques, because I want the members of this committee to see how the sausage machine works, so they know what ingredients to put in when, so we get out what we wanted to get out of the process. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you.
Does.
Yes.
Does.
Courtney and Hillary, does that make sense to you guys? I mean, you're at the pointy end. on this stuff.
Yep, I think Matthew has a great idea there where we can just put some ideas down on paper and then present them back in January, and the ranking is great too, and that will give staff an opportunity to maybe assess what our input will be in each of those goals.
Super, thank you. Any other comments?
John, simply concerning your thoughts around Indigenous advisors, there are protocols for doing this kind of work. And again, I think it rests with the township to seek out those appropriate respondents to any kind of territorial acknowledgement. And I would think it's not just the Six Nations, it's also very much the Mississauga of the Credit, who are our predecessors here as well. And that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, okay. No, your point's well taken. All right. Yeah, there are protocols to be followed, absolutely. And by God, if you don't follow them, we'll certainly hear about it. I'm curious, who are the Mississauga? I mean, I know there's quite a large confederacy, and I'm not sure where all of the Cree, the Iroquois, the Mohawk, where are they working? Do you know where they are working through now, or what organizations they have that would cover our area? I just have lost track of who does what anymore.
Well, I think, John, these are exactly the items that staff can help us look into. And so we're not speculating in a open session on all this. This is exactly why we need to put some structure to this and get that mapping and the information. And I think that's something they can report back to us in January, is who our contact would be to exactly answer those questions.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. That's great. Any other comments on this particular topic?
I have a comment. It's not nearly as grandiose or as idealistic, but I feel that we have started several projects and not really seen them to full completion. One thing that I think I would like to see us do as a committee is come up with a standardized way to assess a property or a heritage landscape or a green natural landscape. But I think we need to come up with parameters that we can apply that are loose enough to grow with this committee and grow with the various topics we talked about and the various landscapes we've talked about. But I think we need structure. And what I like about this committee is that we've talked around a lot of these things. We have done some of this in abstract ways, but I think it would help our staff and future committee members if we could come up with some more concrete parameters. And I think too, taking John Levac's idea of one person visiting a property and taking a video, all of these things would fit into our descriptive context of how to present and catalog a property that we wish to have on a heritage registry. I would like to see that nailed down a little bit. And then there are other topics that have been visited in the past. And I'm going back to this signage one. I believe there was a committee, the same committee that was struck to come up with the new logo for the township. And if I recall, in the summer of 2019, they were doing signage within the community. And there were several comments about some specific locations along the corridor of Highway 6 between Aberfoyle and Puslinch. And I would like to see a follow-up on that committee, sometimes I feel that we're asked for comments, but then I'm never sure that we're given, we get the conclusion of what happened with one of council's projects or one of the side projects that are going on. So I would like to see some unfinished business finished.
That's one way of putting it.
Bravo.
Yeah, I think that it would help if if we had action plans actually in our minutes, because I agree with Barb that there are things that have kind of been dragged along, and I'm guilty of very much of participating in that. I tend to do multiple things at one time, and so some things get delayed, such as my review of the registry. And I often look, when I look back at minutes, I'm often looking for an action so that I can work to a deadline and that we can work as one would if we were actually, you know, business or another working body that has goals and deadlines. Does that fit what you're saying, Barb?
Yes, it is. Courtney and Hillary, for your benefit, I've just grabbed this this document that was circulated by Mary Hassan Thursday, June 6, 2019, regarding the historic corner block in Morriston signage. So here's another committee that has reached out to us. We've tried to answer it, and we don't have a summary of what happened at the end of that discussion. And so, yeah, Mary, those are the types of things. And when I look back in my minutes, I agree with you. Without the action clause, I'm not sure when it comes time for the next meeting, because our meetings are so scattered, that we actually address that. We try to in business from the last meeting, but sometimes I think we slip through the cracks because there might be something more current going on.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be more accountable. I want to see more items come. They may not, it may be a moving target as far as getting something concluded, but at least I want to make sure that these things, we've identified that we've addressed this and we have recorded it so that council does know that we have done this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Barb, would it not be appropriate if we minute these recommendations and projects that we're undertaking or comments that we're making to be, you know, and I agree totally with you. Actually, I had this discussion with Hillary and Courtney earlier about actions arising from the minutes. And I agree. I have a hard time remembering what we actually decided to do because we don't seem to record it as such. And I think that's, your point is extremely well taken. And I think we've got to start doing that so that the next meeting, we have, from this meeting, we have a line saying that staff is going to assist or provide information on Indigenous cultural items, whatever. And we know that that's in our minutes, so when we review them to approve them the next meeting, there's something there that we know what we're approving. Because your point's well taken. Things are a bit nebulous in many regards, but I think that's up to us to start making sure that we, in our minutes, make clear that this is an item that's going to have to be followed up for the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
If I could help with this, John, a little bit.
Yes,
A
please.
little bit of feedback. So a little bit of more insight into how the machine works. We now have a new CAO started just before the pandemic was declared in January. And he was kind enough to provide council with a calendar of all the things he has staff working on. And so all the things we're talking about need to be, you know, highlighted as we're talking about having staff put together a list of things we want to see done in the near term and the long term for our next meeting. The idea is if we get those down on paper, get those as tasks, get them identified, we can then get them through the budget process and through the task scheduling process for the CAO, because we're not the only committee wanting to get things done. But to Barb's point and your point, there's a process to get ourselves into that lineup. And I agree 100%. We need to start getting in line with the other committees and other departments that want to get things done. And I think once this committee understands how that works, we'll get into a routine and a cycle, and staff will then have things to track. If they're not assigned time to work on it from the CAO, from his task schedule, they won't have time to do it. So we want to make sure we work into that. And I think it's, if we get those items to staff at this meeting for them to put together, then we can prioritize those and start moving ahead for all the things in the future. Right now we have 2 things on the list that we've been talking about, possibly 3 or 4, signage and all those other things. Some of them now may have to wait till the next budget cycle, but once we start disciplining ourselves and we have a consistent staff report and the CAO puts us in the task schedule, I think we can start seeing stuff happen.
Matt, is it appropriate, and I stand ignorant of a lot of the protocols that we have to follow. Is it appropriate that the committee request a member or 2 members of the committee to do some research on some of these things we're talking about and report back to the committee the results of that research? Or does that sort of project have to go through staff?
Oh no, I think that's a way that the committee can educate itself and be of value to the township. I'm just talking about things that I'm hearing will require staff time, happen on township property, interpretive signage, all these things which we've all talked about, and I understand the frustration how they may have fallen by the wayside. But there's no harm in staff, in committee members educating themselves so that they can provide thoughtful comment on any of this stuff. It's just a matter of understanding we're not a standalone committee in the community. We are an arm of the township, and we got to be respectful of the staff. Anything we do could affect staff time, and staff's time is being pulled in 100 directions. So I want to make sure we fit into that.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. And yeah, that's kind of my thought was, I don't want to dump stuff projects that perhaps we could do. And of course, Mary and John, Barb, you guys are great at the research side of things. And if we can pick up some of that slack, that's not slack. If we can pick up some of these things and investigate them ourselves so we don't have to ask staff to do it, that just might be of assistance.
Understood, but even at that, staff would still have to confirm what we tell them. You know, to be fair, they're the ones that are going to be held accountable by the boss for anything they say. So they have to make sure that just because we supply it to them, they have to still spend time to confirm that it's accurate. Okay,
fair enough. Yep. Okay, are there any further comments in that regard? If not, we can move on to item 7.
John, just to put a bow on that, maybe the coming out of this would be that everybody in the committee understands if there's something they want to see on that list for January, maybe we should encourage them to get it, to staff. If Barb has her list of signs or any of us that, to confirm what we said, then they can have it in our own words to put back on the agenda. Would that be helpful to Courtney?
Yes, Matthew, that's an excellent idea. If I've written a few notes here just based on the conversation, and Hillary and I can review after the meeting. So we've made a few updates to our minutes where we're going to better reflect direction coming out of the committee so that we are clear on what you're looking for us to do. We're also going to gather all the goals from the committee. So if you wouldn't mind sending a short email list of just some things that have been discussed, and we'll also review some of the past minutes, but just to make sure we have a comprehensive list going into 2021. And then we may try to work on something like what Matthew suggested with, we have a corporate work plan, but perhaps a committee work plan with all the items listed on it for consideration. That we can also maybe have as an agenda item review with the committee at each meeting to make sure we are keeping things on track and they're still moving forward. And then having those presented to council in a staff report. I think Hillary is going to be working on doing a staff report to council on a quarterly basis moving forward in 2021. So I think all of these things will help us better establish how to see some of these tasks through to completion and keep everybody up to date. So I've made those notes, and like Matthew said, if perhaps you can send us some items that some that we've talked about today and some that have been talked about previously, that would be really helpful.
Would it be appropriate if members of the committee communicated with each other so we don't inundate you with similar or the same ideas, so we can, you know, individually, I think we've all got some pretty good ideas, but we might be able to distill them down to, you know, main topics of discussion that we can go forward with. That just might save a bit of time for staff and not step outside of any protocols of having meetings outside of the official meetings. It's really just developing the agendas.
Yep, that sounds great. If it can be kind of a consolidated list, however that can make its way to us, that would be great.
Super. Okay, any other comments? Okay, then.
To that end, John, I would propose that each of us send them in individually to one member of the committee to compile, as opposed to each of us talking about it together.
Yep. Okay. No. Yep. I agree, Matt. And somebody can, you know, Mary. Unfortunately, you are so good at this stuff. You may be the recipient of a boatload of comments, but I think it is appropriate that, you know, it go through one person and we distill them down into one list of things that we'd like to move forward with. Is that meet with everyone's approval?
I think it's the chair, John. You might.
I would love to say I'm not going to be around to do that. I'm going to be away, but I'm not. Okay, fine. I'll be more than happy to do that, actually. I was just trying to delegate, Mary, that was all.
Well, why don't we, you know, if we share through
Send everything. Everybody send comments.
we can.
Yeah, no, everyone send your comments to me. I'll assemble them into an order, and then we'll circulate them around the group and say, okay, does everybody agree that this is where we're going to go? So I can be more than happy to do that, actually.
I would, yeah.
Okay, that being said, we have a consent, the consent agenda. We have a resolution. Actually, Hillary, do you want to read that resolution out?
Yeah, absolutely. So resolution number 2020-002, that the consent agenda item 7.1 for the October 5th, 2020 Heritage Committee meeting be received for information.
Okay, now what do we need to do about that?
So we do need a mover and a seconder, John.
I'll move it to put it on the table for discussion.
Thank you. Seconder?
I will.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, any discussion?
I have to, sure.
Go ahead.
So just to give a little bit of background to committee members, as it sort of indicates in the resolution attached there, this correspondence came to council, and I thought it was important at the time to share this with the other committees, because I wanted, especially the Heritage Committee, I wanted the Heritage Committee to know what options are out there to save barns, but I also wanted to let the Heritage Committee know that we've actually done a lot of this already. What I found was interesting in some of the recommendations that they're talking about in this report on how to keep barns, how to have them stay without having them torn down to accommodate a severance or something. These are already solutions that our planning committee and the planning department at the county have been using to preserve some of these barns. So I thought it was good news. It was sort of confirmation that what staff have been recommending already is in line with what barn preservation people would support. And it was nice to see that this kind of correspondence come through, which kind of endorsed what we're already doing. And I wanted you guys to see, and in case you had any other suggestions or any tweaks that you might want to recommend back up to council or to staff on this matter.
I do have a comment. John, if you don't mind. I agree with you, Matthew. I was aware of some of the initiatives that you are talking about. And I found it interesting that there was a separate organization who have come together as caring individuals. They're not associated with any municipality that I could see or any governance that I could see. But I do think, in addition to the comments that you've already made about how we in Pusage are addressing some of these things already, we do live in a community where other measures are available for barns that are going to be demolished. So if you recall, recently there was a barn demolition permit for a barn right across the road from me. There was a salvage group from the Mennonite community that came in and took as much of that barn as they could, which I think is very gratifying. So these barns may not live in our community as they were erected, but because of this Mennonite group close to us, we are able to see some of our buildings that may be demolished live again in another community. And I think that's a worthy comment as well, that some of them may be sacrificed, but they will live on in another community.
That's brilliant. And I say that as an owner of a repurposed barn. You know, that's the one thing that's interesting, is as junky as mine is, it's not in its first location. There's so much evidence of it being repurposed from another location, yet it lives on. And perhaps there's something in what you said there about informing staff that when we get these applications, or if it has to happen, that this, I don't know if it's appropriate for township to share that information, but we need to make it more widely available, that is an option. So thank you so much.
Matt?
Sorry, that's an excellent comment, Matthew. And I think, awareness of the demolition is going on. And I agree with you. I'm not sure if it's appropriate for staff. I know that these particular owners themselves did reach out for that, but something that maybe as part of the demolition process we should be aware of under a footnote of recommendations, what to do with a building. Just a thought.
Matthew, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, so can you give me an example of the work the township's doing to conserve barns?
Well, if you look at some of the recommendations in the report, one of them was down zoning of barn, or restrictive zoning on a barn, to allow it to remain as, you know, sort of remove the ability for it to have animals. So you zone it so it's no longer a permitted use to use it for livestock, which eliminates the minimum distance separation requirements, so someone can keep it as a storage facility, or, you know, if you're storing hay or equipment, but not for livestock. So then it allows someone to get a severance, as opposed to tearing the barn down to get a severance. With severances now going for $500,000 plus, it's a big incentive to tear a barn down just to get a lot. So this is we were criticized, and even myself, I struggle with the idea of changing the zoning on a barn or changing the permitted use on a barn, because if I buy a property and it has a barn with stalls in it, or it's a barn that looks like a barn, why can't I put animals in it? It creates that potential misunderstanding, but it seems to have been working so far. I think the townships use it 2 or 3 times now to enable a barn to remain in order to get a severance by barring livestock from the barn.
The reason I'm asking is, first of all, the Ontario Heritage Act doesn't cover barns. And so there's little statutory protection for barns. And my experience with Heritage Guelph is that when developers move in, barns are the first thing that are sacrificed, as opposed to perhaps the original residence. And often they're sacrificed on the basis of a civil engineering structural report that says that the barn is structurally unsound. Often that's the case because it hasn't been occupied, it hasn't been cared for. And committees feel there's little redress, that they're negotiating the continued presence of a residence in lieu of these outbuildings. And so and there's lots of issues around conservation of barns. And I'm just wondering what more needs to be done in order to support these important parts of our heritage landscapes. These farmhouses exist because they had barns as part of the agricultural operation. And anyway, that's.
No, agreed. And we haven't managed to save them all. There was
Yeah.
one on 32 that, due to the change of use, the township required it to be removed. So it hasn't been 100% successful, but I try to focus on awareness, and I like Barb's suggestion. Wherever it lives, it still lives, and I'm going to try and think about a way to build that into a barn demolition permit process without the township becoming marketing or promoting a particular barn salvage company.
We visited a barn and a residence a few years ago on our tour, and it was an unusual barn formation. It's near the municipal offices, I'll say that much, and yet I don't know how we can protect that, or if we can. And because of the way that our plaques have been organized, we can't plaque it for its architectural conservation because it's not in good shape, but it is historically, I would say, significant. So I do think what I'm trying to get at here is that recording is really important at this point. We need to record those extant barns because I think a lot of them are at risk. And that's part of conservation, is simply documenting. Add that to the list, guys. Documenting barns. Some of that's been done by Lynn Crow and our antecedents here. That's all I'll say on that.
So there are no recommendations or comments we're going to make going forward with this. Then do we need a resolution for this, Hillary, to?
I don't think so. The only resolution was the one that was received for information. So if there's nothing else, I think we can move on.
Okay. Next item are delegations, and I don't believe we have any today.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Okay. Now there's Mary, you've talked about this in the past a little bit, but would you care to make some comments on the Alliance for Historic Landscape?
Oh,
Yeah. Update in the newsletter?
I thought I'd send that to you just so that you know that as a member of this committee, the kind of work I do that's related with this cultural landscape group. And as we've talked about in this committee, cultural landscapes are part of our purview. And I was to report back on this year's conference, which was COVIDed out. So I thought I'd send you this from last year's. And it was a conference I helped organize. There wasn't a lot of rural So there weren't a lot of rural sites at that conference, but there was some Indigenous sites. So that's pretty much it. And we are looking at organizing a conference in Guelph at some time in the future. And that's all. It's an information item.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Then can we move on to the item 10 committee reports?
Sorry, John. There is a resolution for item number 9.
What, there is a resolution for that?
Yeah, just I'll read it out, and we do need a mover and a seconder as well.
Okay, all right.
So that the correspondence item 9.1 regarding Alliance for Historic Landscape Conserving Cultural Landscapes update and newsletter be received for information.
Okay, moved.
I so move that this has been received for information.
Thanks, Barb. Seconded.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Mary.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Okay, I didn't realize we had to acknowledge that, but with the new format that you're introducing to us, Hillary and Courtney, well done. Okay, committee reports. Hillary, I'm going to throw that in over to you before, as the first person to talk about this.
Perfect, will do. So I hope you've all gotten a chance to take a look at the report. So essentially this is all about the Heritage Registry that the township has. So the report was written for essentially 2 purposes. So the first was we want to make sure that we're in compliance with the Ontario Heritage Act. In 2006, that act was amended to include the municipal clerk as well as the municipal council as well. So the roles that are listed in the act there, the municipal clerk is required to have a full complete list of the registry, and any changes or removals to the Heritage Registry have to go through council as well. And additionally, I know we were talking about this in the meeting as well, about properties that are going forth through demolition. Part of the reason why we'd like to have a complete Heritage Registry is so that we know what properties are listed on the registry, and so that we can let staff know if something is coming forth to be demoed. Then that way, if it is listed on our registry, we can put this forth to the Heritage Committee.
Hillary,
And, yep.
would you expand a little bit on that? You gave me an example of the issues of not having a complete registry up to date in place, and the work it causes for the staff, because that particular example, there were many hours spent that if we had the registry up to date, I don't think you would have had to spend. So if you wouldn't mind taking a minute and just explain to the committee what happened.
For sure. So when a demolition permit comes in through the township, we do check to see if it is listed on the Heritage Registry. And right now, it's sort of all over the place and it's difficult to see if it is. There is a little application on the Wellington GIS thing that says it, but sometimes it's not always reflective of what is listed on the registry. And then if we're not able to determine if something is listed on the registry or not, it might not be possible to essentially have that demolition permit go through for the committee. So we want to make it as easy for staff as possible to look at a permit that comes in and go, oh, okay, this one is listed on our Heritage Registry. Now we know that this has to go through to the committee.
And sorry, if I just can add just a little bit to that, to Hillary's explanation. A lot of it, it has to do with the timing of when these properties went to council for approval. So again, if any properties went pre-2006, they would essentially be identified as an inventory list only. They're not actually part of the register. If they went after 2006, that's when the act changed to allow municipalities to list a property versus actually register it, in which case those listed properties are given 60 days once the intent to demo has been made for the review to happen by the committee and by council to determine if they need to be registered or essentially the demo could go ahead. And sorry, as a registered property through bylaw. So I think what staff is having a hard time with maybe is just the terminology used on the register as it is right now. So we have inventoried, under research, we have listed, we have plaqued, we have several names where the act really identifies them in a shorter list of ways. So I think what staff would benefit from would be if we had a register that either listed them as an inventory property, a listed property, or one that is registered through bylaw. That way we could determine the next steps if we did get an intent to demo.
Mhm. Can I speak to that? So this is this is one of those things that I need a action plan for. I am Hillary. I'm currently working through all these properties that are on the inventory, and I am trying to assess them as having significance under the heritage, the regulations of the Ontario Heritage Act, so that should a demolition permit be submitted, that we have kind of a legislative base for permitting that demolition or requesting a delay on it. Does that make sense to you, Hillary?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, now this was a project that Julia Murray worked on last summer, and it's what, you know, I sort of assumed it when she left, and I have been probably less than diligent at working at it, but I think that this is a good incentive for me to finish that work. And Hillary, is it possible for you and I to do this in some way virtually in conjunction with each other?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and now there were a lot of paper copies that Julia had that I don't seem to have. So regardless of that, I would like to stay in a conversation with you about this so that we can get this done ASAP. And the objective was to have a well-researched group of properties that can be rationalized as being appropriate for a registry. Does that make sense? Okay. So what I'm finding as I work through these is the need to move some from what may have been not worthy of plaquing to worthy of plaquing, because my concern is that should people want to demolish, what they see currently in our catalogs are something that says doesn't qualify for plaquing, because the plaquing criteria were mostly based on condition. So in other words, Hillary, I am working on this, and I am trying to make it leak proof. That may not help you in the immediate, just trying to figure out if something falls within those categories on your list. But I am always happy to respond if you need some sources for figuring that out.
Could I just through our research that we were doing for when a demo permit came forward, I believe about a month ago, and we spent some time looking into this, did any properties come forward for council approval, or would all properties on that list be considered an inventory? We had a hard time tracking down a council resolution that listed any property past 2006. And it would be very helpful at this point if we were able to determine if it's strictly an inventory list or if there were properties that were officially listed on the register.
Can I speak to this, please, John?
Yeah.
Courtney, and again, my paperwork's not here, but we have over the past few years received several comments. We had a comment from Karen Landry that we did have an inventory list that was submitted to council 2010, but for some reason nobody could find that reflected this. And that was just kind of left hanging. So it leads me to wonder, does council have an approved listing of any kind? So going back to your question, prior to 2006 was just an inventory list for a 2000 millennial project. After 2006 was a requirement that municipalities do have an inventory list. So my question to you is, do you have what you feel is an inventory list to date?
So
I'm
Barb,
confused about that.
no, I know I have the same questions as you. Based on our research, we went to the archives and we were able to get that list of 100 properties that were memorialized during the year 2000 for the millennium. But that I did also reach out to Center Wellington has an expert on it's their heritage coordinator that works for Center Wellington. So I did reach out to her and get some information, and it was very helpful. And she basically said, unless things had happened after 2006 through council, all you have is an inventory list. Nothing is, you don't have a register. So based on what we've been able to locate in our digital files and in our hard copy files, it seems as though we have an inventory list. And our next step would be to figure out which properties the committee would recommend to be on the register and to have those approved by council, even if it's a short list. Center Wellington let me know that in 2012, they created their register. And at the time, they moved about 750 properties total onto the list. About 650 were listed status, and about 100 were actually designated through bylaw. So they did that all at once, and they had a public meeting for it. And they were there to answer questions. They said they actually didn't get a lot of negative feedback, which was very promising. But it is a bit of a process, and that leads me to believe that Puslinch likely doesn't have a register. But we're still trying to go through some of our files to determine that 100%.
So
I have a second, sorry, Mary. I have a second question for you. From a staff perspective, would it be advantageous to have a list, which our committee would say needs work, but still a list at your disposal should you have these permits come in, with the proviso that the work that Mary's doing would be used in the very near future to correct or edit that list? I feel we are leaving council hanging and staff hanging because we're not providing you with some information that we have, even though we are in the process of rechecking it. Or is it better for us to spend the time and the energy for Mary and Hillary to get the list more, for lack of a better word, more accurate?
If there's, I would say that the one problematic or challenging part of that is if we have an inventory list and no register. If we receive an intent to demo and we do not have that property listed, it is no longer eligible to be on the register in any capacity. So if it's listed, meaning the committee believes it meets the criteria of the Heritage Act, it's not designated, but it's listed, that gives the committee those 60 days to review the demo application and determine, does this meet the criteria to be designated? If so, the committee would have to make that recommendation to council. Or does the committee just want those 60 days to collect information, photos, things for historical value that gives you that 60-day buffer? But if you don't have a register and it's not listed, you've lost your opportunity. So I would say, to answer your question, I think that if you have a list of properties, even a short list that you believe is worth creating a register for, and then working on maybe the fuller list in more detail to be brought forward later, I think that's something to consider.
Courtney, I can say we do not have a registry. We do not. We have a list. I believe the registry has to be approved by council. Is that correct?
Yes, so we have, based on what you've indicated, we have an inventory list. We do not have a register.
Yeah. And in the past, that inventory list came up, as was highlighted, if a demolition permit was submitted. And so staff were probably, as you are right now, were alerted if the property had in some way been identified as having heritage value. But as you said, it's not legally protected. I believe under the amendments to the Ontario Heritage Act now, or whichever act it was under the Ford government, property owners now need to approve approve their property being on a register. Is that correct in your mind?
Based on my discussions with the heritage coordinator at Center Wellington, those notification requirements are not yet in effect. But that's largely due to it COVID and the holdups of it. What they are recommending is that it's a best practice at this point to adhere to those notification requirements, because they will come into effect, any time. But the notification requirements has to happen 30 days after a property has been listed. The new notification requirements would have us do that in advance. So holding a public meeting and doing it in advance would be best practice.
My thought is that a list could be compiled quickly based on plaque structures, a quick review of plaque structures, which we have done. And I think that could be put together, do you not, other committee members, very quickly? If we start with the plaque structures?
Well, Mary, the plaque houses are listed on Puslinch's website, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, they are, but what I'm saying is, if we want to proceed with the registry, why don't we proceed with the ones that are already identified?
Yes.
And move them from a list to a legal register.
Well, remember all the massive work we did identifying the properties a couple of years ago, visiting them, getting photos, yada, 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 yada. Haven't we done a lot of the work that's necessary?
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
Have.
So we really need to assemble that into a proper presentation that can be presented to council.
Or to staff, yeah.
Or sorry, to staff, and then, yeah, exactly.
So when would you like that, Courtney and Hillary? Yesterday?
Well, I like your idea, Mary, of just going with the plaqued properties. I think that makes it simplistic. It's already what's on the website. People have those plaques on their homes, so it's not a surprise to those individuals. So I think that's a great place to start. I know that we did look, Hillary, we were looking through our digital files, and we did find a lot of that work that was done through the site visits and photos and things. So we were thinking on our end, before we brought this list to council, it does just have to go through resolution. There's no bylaw required to list the properties. And once one property is listed, that creates your register. So once we do this, we will have an official register. What we can do for our report to council, if we feel it's beneficial, which it might be, I think, is to take some of those photos and the descriptions of the homes on that list and include it in a comprehensive report for council. So if they had a question about a particular property on the list, they would have the kind of backup documentation that you've already spent so much time working on. So I know Hillary knows where all of that is in the drive, and we could work to compile something and provide it to the committee. We may have to do that through email, or we could hold a special meeting if we feel that it's necessary later in the year. And then, I mean, we could potentially have this go to council by the end of 2020 if that's kind of the prerogative of the committee.
I think that's a great idea. And I do think if you look at the forms that Barb and I made up for Julia to input these properties, there are criteria under the Ontario Heritage Act for identifying significance. And that is what you'll need with each property.
Okay, that's good to know, Hillary. We can make note of that, and we can start compiling our research on this, and then maybe once we have some information put together, we can decide how to best circulate that to the committee and get comments and feedback before it goes to council.
Hillary, are you familiar with the forms that Julia worked on, or has that come across to you yet?
I haven't seen those yet. If you could send those to me, Mary, I can review that.
Happily, and I'll send you. Well, I think maybe Hillary, if you and I could just talk further about them, because they're fairly detailed, but the components that you need for the register, we can winnow down and get in place.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Mary.
Okay.
Could I just add one more comment? Courtney and Hillary, we've struggled with this with the names of these properties. They have arbitrary historical names or heritage names. The better cross-referencing for you was probably the municipal code or the tax rule number, I believe. I'm not sure that those have been cross-referenced. I know a couple of times we did find errors with the assigned municipal code in the software that you have. Is it called Prinz, your software? Something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
so I think in compiling this list and making it user-friendly for you, we would have to come up with some identifier that works for the person making the inquiry and for staff trying to quickly identify the property.
I think it was it not the legal address?
The municipal code, is that?
Yeah, like, you know, the legal address of the lot, like lot, whatever, concession. No?
Well, Mary, we were trying to cross-reference a lot of those because there was some properties were described with the municipal address, some were described differently. And I know that was one of our projects when we looked at all these properties, was to try and standardize the description so you know where to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that was done, if I recall. I'm trying to find that on my machine, but I know I've got it in hard copy because we printed a lot of that stuff out.
If I could, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Matthew, please.
So if I could just clarify with staff here, there were two lists attached to the report, and the second one appears, is it a compilation of the both? The 100 residents or buildings from the first one appear in the second list. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor Balmer. So essentially, the second list was compiled by a student that was working for the township, I think in 2019, and she put the list together. But some of the properties that are listed on that second list, or rather properties that are listed on the first list aren't covered in the second list. So I thought it was prudent to include both lists for your consideration.
Oh, aren't covered. So there's some, I didn't have a chance to compare the two. So that some of the first aren't on the second?
That's correct.
Okay, because I got to say, having it, that second list with the one with the in a spreadsheet with the roll number and the lot and concession and the municipal number was excellent. I could sort it by lot, concession, and front and rear, and it was just so easy to use to find if you wanted to find a specific property. So kudos to whoever put that together with little notes attached. I have one question. I'm still struggling with this pre-2006, post-2006. So if I understand it correctly, the requirements pre-2006 were, was there such a thing as a registry before 2006, or was it just an inventory and designated?
If I might, the Act pre-2006 allowed municipalities to have a register, but it had to be properties designated through bylaw. They did not count properties that we would consider listed just for historical significance, but not quite designated. That didn't exist prior to 2006. They either were designated or they were not on the register.
Okay, so hold on a second. Now, I'm trying to keep my head in. I'm hearing there's three things. There's an inventory, a registry, and property being designated. Now you're saying the registry can include designated properties.
Sorry, yes, maybe I'll just clarify. So the register now can include a designated property or a listed property. So it has two designations within the register.
Two classes of properties on a registry.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, and that's the terminology that
I know.
It's
Yeah.
hard if we're using different. So after 2006 and onward, you could have two different categories on the register, designated or listed. Pre-2006, the Heritage Act didn't recognize that. The register could only have designated properties.
Oh, okay. So anything that wasn't designated didn't have any standing.
Right.
Okay, so then post 2006, a municipality could have you could put both on a registry. One would have more standing than the other. So then, since we didn't do, if there's no record of the township doing that, then clearly we have no properties. I know we have no designated under the Act, and while we have a list of properties we're interested in having as an inventory on the registry, we currently have none, and therefore there's no so anybody could put a demolition permit in today for any of the properties that are currently on our inventory list.
Correct.
And there would be no 60-day process for them.
That's correct. Technically, we could not hold up the building
Okay, no.
permit process. Yeah.
That's fine. Just to clarify, now I thank you so much. I finally got the knot untied in my head. I don't have a headache anymore. Thank you so much.
And the other thing, Matt, is that if a demolition permit is submitted and the item, the building is not on the registry, it cannot then be put on the registry. So this is why it's so critical to get this together, because if it's not on the registry, it has no protection.
That's my
Excellent.
question. If it's not a designated property, what protection does it have anyway, other than the 60-day, discussion period?
It does.
That's protection.
Sorry, Mary, you go ahead.
No, I was just saying, if it's on the registry, John, and it's not designated, there's a 60-day period in which it can be designated. That's the protection.
What are the odds of a situation being somebody buys a property, their whole incentive is to demolish it and put something else on it? We hear about it, it goes into the 60-day process. What are the odds of actually achieving getting it actually designated under those circumstances, especially since we've got 0 designated properties at this point? Isn't that like 100% unlikely? Like, how do you get a designation on a property after somebody's bought it for the purpose of demolishing it? How do you do that?
Are you asking me or?
I'm asking anybody who can answer that question. if I bought a property for, as Matthew pointed out, vacant lots at Severances are going for $500,000 plus. If I bought a property, obviously for a lot more, and my goal was to demolish it, what interest would I have in talking to anybody about getting a heritage designation over a 60-day period after I bought that property for 7 figures? Like zero, absolutely zero. So why are we even talking about this?
We're talking about it because once a property is on the register,
Yeah.
that is a legal attachment to that property. In other words, if it's put up for sale, the real estate folks and the buyer have that information. So often what will happen is, in my experience, is there will be a request submitted to a municipal council to have a property removed from the register by someone who's interested in either selling it with the knowledge that there's an intent to demolish by the purchaser, or by the purchaser themselves. So, I mean, properties I've been participated in Heritage Committee where properties were saved from demolition.
And if I could just
by
comment,
on a register.
oh, sorry, Mary. If
Go
I
on,
could
Courtney.
just comment further on it, once we have a register in place, which even if it just includes a listed property, a property's status on that register is now applicable law under the building code. So the CBO cannot issue a demo permit unless applicable law has been satisfied. So that's where our zoning department would check the status on the register, and that permit would not proceed. It would stop. Applicable law has not been satisfied, and therefore whatever the committee and council wishes to have happen on that property would have to occur prior to the demo permit being issued. So it does have quite a bit of legal backing in the building permit process. It's just without that register, we're left, we're kind of left a little bit powerless when those demo permits do come in.
Okay, Courtney, that's a good explanation. Thank you for that. And also, I have to actually leave the meeting. I've got a medical appointment now. I didn't think this was going to go quite this long, so I have to say bye-bye for now, everybody.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
I'll talk to y'all later.
Okay,
Bye.
so you'll record that John Levesque has left the meeting.
So, Mr. Chair, are you looking for a resolution? We had a suggestion there that the buildings that are currently plaqued form the initial registry. Is staff looking for a resolution to that effect to help them get started on that?
Yeah, yes, we are, Councillor. So I have a resolution here, if I can read that out, and then John will also need a mover and a seconder for it.
Thank you, Hillary.
So resolution number 2020-004, that report HER 2020-001 regarding the Heritage Registry of Listed Properties be received, and that the Heritage Committee authorize this report and a list of properties to be provided to the Township Council for their approval of the Heritage Registry of Listed Properties.
I'll
Mover.
move, yeah.
Thank you. Seconder?
I'll second.
Thanks, Mary. All in favor?
I have a question though before we finish.
I'm sorry, Matthew, my protocol, I'm out of step here. Any comments?
I have a question for staff on, so I just want to clarify on that resolution. I don't think I heard in the resolution that it was going to be the ones that were plaqued were going to be moved forward for putting on the registry. And I also have a question about any errors. We talked earlier about if we have any outstanding errors of that list or of the information, do you want those to be addressed as well prior to going to council?
Yes, I think that would be best. So I can include in the resolution that it is a list of plaqued properties to be provided to council.
And then Hillary, if you maybe just want to add, and that the Heritage Committee will provide a comprehensive list, including all properties on the inventory list once updates have been made. Just something to the effect that we'll bring forward the rest of the list at a later date.
Okay, those amendments to the motion acceptable?
Mhm.
Okay. All in favor?
I support it. Yep.
Opposed? None? Carried. Okay, next item, Barb, you started chatting about it earlier, which was the budget allowance for heritage plaques. Do you want to carry that on? And you had some comments on that.
Yes, and my problem seems to be unfamiliarity with budget matters and how to properly go forward. I was given an allowance based on 2018 leftover money from education and travel expenses for our committee to investigate the cost of having plaques repaired and more plaques made for this committee. Due to my inexperience and ignorance with how this all worked, I assumed that money was mine going forward to do this, but I didn't realize at the end of that year, 2019, that budget money was no longer available to me. So I do need some staff guidance in how to go forward with this. So I'm asking for a budget item for 2020 to continue this request. The idea was that the committee have 10 plaques available to them for recognizing heritage properties. I have costed that out now, and I feel that I can do this with a budget of $2,000. So I am requesting a budget of $2,000 to repair and blast some existing plaques that the committee has. The cost of casting and polishing a new plaque, I was quoted at $180 in 2019. I may have to review that. So that I feel that I can readdress that original request for 10 plaques. 4 of them will be refurbished ones. We've decided not to go with the black paint on them anymore, but instead to cast them in bronze and polish them as bronze plaques now. So that's what I'm requesting. $2,000 to have an inventory of 10 plaques available for this committee.
Okay, other members of the committee, any comments on Barb's request? I think we actually, Barb, I think you're quite right. We weren't allowed to roll that money forward, which was a shame. Anyways,
Well,
I think if sorry, Barb.
I need to understand the protocols a little bit more. So here I am in October of 2020 making this budget request. I'm assuming that, help me with this, Hillary, is this going to be a budget request for 2021 then?
Courtney,
Yeah,
sorry, Courtney, it'd be 2021, correct?
Yes, so I'm just, we can include a resolution to this effect, Barb, and we are just putting together our proposed operating budget for 2021 for each of the committees. So we'll make sure that this is included as a request for council's consideration.
Okay.
Okay, staff, would you like a resolution that the committee requests this particular item be
Yes.
included in the budget process? Okay.
Yes, please.
Hillary, could you prepare the appropriate words for this? And if are we all in favor of this?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so I can read the resolution, John.
thank you.
So that resolution number 2020-005, that the verbal report regarding budget allowance for heritage plaques by Barb Jefferson be received for information, and that a budget item of $2,000 for 10 plaques be included in the proposed operating budget for 2021.
Moved.
I'll move it.
Thanks, Mary. Seconded.
I'll second
I'll
it.
second.
Thanks, Matthew. Any discussion? no discussion?
Could I just add one proviso?
Yes, you can.
Again, since this was a 2019 budget item, I would still like to request this amount of money. However, going forward, 10 may not be the number of plaques. So possibly we should reword it with the number of plaques I can purchase for $2,000.
Okay, so
Appropriate number of plaques.
appropriate number of plaques, perfect for the.
Okay, all in favor?
In favor?
Opposed? None? Carried. Okay, moving on to item 10.3, cemetery research. Mary, you've been doing that. Would you care to
Oh,
comment about that?
within this alliance for conserving cultural heritage landscapes that I belong to, cemeteries are considered cultural heritage landscapes, and they are by the province of Ontario as well. And so they can be listed on the register and they can be designated if needs be. The research that I've been doing is an inventory study of the 9 pioneer cemeteries in the township. And I am looking at layout, I'm looking at funerary art, I'm looking at demography, and I'm looking at community. So it fits within the jurisdiction of this committee, but it's a bit expanded because I have to produce these articles for the Pioneer, and that somewhat directs the way I go with this. Suffice to say that this inventory will provide the basis, I think, for us to plaque each of these cemeteries. On our own inventory, I think Crown may be plaqued, I'm not sure, but the rest just say not plaqued, but protected. And they're protected under the Cemeteries Act, but they're definitely not protected. And so many of these smaller ones that are closed, I think, are at risk. And I think it would benefit them to be plaqued so that people can see these as heritage landscapes. And by that point, the rationale for that will be constructed by me as I do this research. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, I was unaware that cemeteries could actually be desecrated.
Be desecrated?
Yeah, well, what would people do with a cemetery? I mean, do people
Well,
build them?
they break stones,
Oh no, I understand all that. I understand the vandalism and all the rest of it, but I thought that basically cemeteries, for lack of a better word, were consecrated ground.
well, not regardless, I do think that people coming upon these small cemeteries in our township would benefit from seeing something, whether it's a heritage plaque or something else that says this place has heritage value, so that it's recognized.
Yeah, no argument about that at all, Mary. I'm just personal curiosity. Why wouldn't they be? I mean, I see that, but people are going to commit vandalism or commit it anyways. Doesn't matter. I totally agree with designating the cemeteries, and I think they should be plaques should be there installed therein. Well, you and I both agree with this. We've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, what do we need to do as a committee to help move this along?
Well, I don't know. I think by the time I'm through with this research, what you'll need to do is just support my recommendations, I think.
Okay, no, very good. That's excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments about that, Mary? Or that's kind of your You've got the last two items on the agenda.
Well, not so much. The only other thing I'll say about that is that there is such a wealth of information in these cemeteries that supports all our other heritage interests. So the individuals that built those structures that we may be trying to protect are there, their families are there, and there's information about them on the monuments themselves, information about the families that I don't see in other historical sources. So that's, yeah, that's it. I think they're quite significant heritage resources.
John, we also have a resolution for that as well, if there are no more
Okay.
comments from the committee.
Okay,
So that resolution 2020-006, that the verbal report regarding cemetery research by Mary Tivey be received for information.
okay. Moved,
I so move.
seconded.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Matthew. Any comments? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Carried. And then, Mary, we'll leave the penultimate word to you on signage, heritage signage. Have you got any further comments on that?
Actually, this item is the same one that Barb referred to earlier on, which was, I was under the impression that there was some signage task force going forward, and that we were somehow going to be involved in decisions about interpretive signage or so that was more a question of where is that work now?
Like that which we have, Barb so eloquently put, it's fallen in limbo at the moment. Well, I'm afraid,
It was around that it was going to be, I believe, down Brock Road, as Barb said. Is that correct, Barb?
If I can, Hillary, if I can call you and Courtney in my correspondence, the subject is Township Signage Master Plan.
Mhm.
Yes, so just to, I know that some of the signs have, that plan is still underway. We did
Okay.
kind of complete our work with the consultants, Obs and Muggs. That was the design team. They're also the ones that did our new website for us. But we could get an update on the signage master plan and provide it like kind of a status update back to the committee at our next meeting, or even just through email if that would be helpful, just in advance of, waiting till January.
That would be great, because we have other correspondence that we've received October 16th, 2019, from now Councillor Sarah Bailey. And she was referring to signage marking historical settlements. And that was a letter that our committee received. And I don't know that we ever responded to her, or what is our obligation to respond to somebody who does submit a letter to us. And I'm sure Courtney and Hillary, you do not have a copy of this in front of you right now. But these are the types of loose ends that I'm looking to tidy up.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I believe Barb, you're probably looking to tie up the loose end with the Black Ord family and the correspondence I think we received from Gilmore's.
Absolutely, that as well.
Okay.
And it goes back to what Mary was talking about. Let me backtrack a little bit here, Courtney and Hillary. I guess I was hoping that the Township Signage Master Plan, I appreciate that it's probably focusing on the corridor between Aberfoyle and Morriston, but with interest in that the signage around the Black property that was donated to the township, and some of the other topics that we've had, and again, as well as this letter from Sarah Bailey, it seemed to me that somehow these should all have been forwarded to a Township Signage Master Plan Committee, and some resolution or some direction come out of that. And simply because the Heritage Committee has been attached to that. I feel I'm missing information, or perhaps as you've alluded, this is ongoing.
I do believe it's ongoing. It's kind of, the work is being done kind of shared between various departments. So our treasurer, as well as our director of public works, are all partaking in this at this stage of the plan. And perhaps we can report back on where it is currently standing for the committee, whether it's just through an email, like that might just be easiest to let you know. And then if it is something that deserves more discussion by the committee, we could bring it back as an official item on the next agenda.
And I appreciate that, Courtney. I think, and it may well be that because of COVID, things are delayed, but if this committee is still operating, I think there's still time then to have these direct questions addressed. Particularly, I'm concerned that we have a letter from a member of our municipality that we haven't addressed. I don't like to see that.
Okay, absolutely. Do you think you could forward, if we don't already have it, perhaps to Hillary and myself, just that letter, and then we can touch base with the other departments and then find out if it was ever, if this person was ever responded to, or where the project is at.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just an acknowledgement from us that we've received the letter, I think. And yes, I will do that. I will send it to you this afternoon.
Okay, any further comments?
I have a comment. It's not necessarily to the signage item. I would really appreciate, since we're looking at goals and tasks, having minutes received much earlier than the agenda package, because sometimes my notes aren't complete and I don't have time to prepare for the meeting that I'd like.
Okay, if we were to, and I understand it's a unique challenge when meetings are only quarterly, if we were to complete the minutes from this meeting, let's say within a week of the meeting, and then circulate to the committee. Now, it won't be for approval because we have to do that at the meeting, but simply just to circulate for your information, and then and for accuracy and for all of those things, but then to bring them back for approval to the committee in January. Would that be a helpful practice going forward?
It would for me.
Yes, it would be very much. Courtney, I think it's Courtney speaking. And if you just mark them draft, then everybody can make comments, whatever they need to make, and return them to you, so that the minutes coming out for approval have had the various members' comments, errors, omissions, changes, etc., corrected prior to the finalization of it, so that everything's done, ahead of time. And if you can get them out in the next week or 10 days, that would be great. It gives us lots of time to get back. And if people don't get back, that's their responsibility. Certainly not yours. So,
Hillary, I think that timeline could work. Do you?
Yeah.
okay,
For
good,
sure.
good point, Mary. I thank you very much for that. I think it'll make life easier for everybody if we can do that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other items of business?
So John, we'll just put in a resolution for these signage for item 10.4 on the agenda.
Okay, you want a resolution for everything, Hillary?
I
Okay.
do.
All right, no, that's fine, that's fine. If you would read the resolution, please.
Sure. We've got a few more to go as well, John. So resolution 2020-007, that the verbal report regarding heritage signage by Mary Tivy be received for information.
I so move.
Seconded?
I'll second.
Thanks, Mary. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Carried. Thank you. Okay, are we done? Has anyone got any further business they wish to discuss?
I actually do, John. So we do need to discuss the dates for the next meetings in the 2021.
Okay. have you got a schedule there?
I do, which I'd like to present to the committee for their approval as well. So also a resolution.
It's okay.
Right.
Fire away.
Perfect. So the next meeting, so resolution number 2020-008, that the next meeting of the Heritage Committee be on Monday, January 11th, 2021, and that next year's committee dates be on the first Monday of a quarterly basis. So on April 5th, July 5th, and October 4th of 2021.
Well, speaking off the record, don't bother minuting this. I don't think I'm going to be doing anything on January the 11th. So as far as I'm concerned, it's the schedule meets with my requirements. Anyone have any comments about it? Matt?
Well,
Matthew?
What was the July date?
He's muted.
July 5th, Mary.
That's not a holiday?
Oh, Jan,
No, it's not. Never mind. Sorry.
okay, yeah, I was looking up my calendar too. Anyone have any comments about the schedule? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve the schedule. A
So moved.
resolution.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Carried. Okay, thanks, Hillary, for that. We've just about got to the end of this now. Where did I put it? Oh, there it is. So I guess the last item of business is to call for adjournment or call for termination or adjournment, whichever you care to call it. Do we need a resolution for?
We do.
adjournment? Oh my goodness. Okay, if you would be so kind as to read that resolution, please.
So resolution number 2020-009, that the Heritage Committee hereby adjourns at 2:56 p.m.
All in favor?
I so move.
Yeah, a second.
Sorry. I'm getting tired. Seconded. Thank you, Matt. All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Well, thanks, Matt. It's great talking to, seeing and talking to everybody again. I really miss our face-to-face meetings, but however, this too will pass.
I want to thank staff for their commitment and involvement today. It really does help to have you here to answer some of these questions that need your expertise. So thank you both, Courtney and Hillary.
Mhm.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Barb.
Thanks,
I
Barb.
second that.
Well, thanks, everyone. Take care.
Hey, be well, everybody.
Yep, thank
Keep
you.
safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.